Hey there, welcome to my channel. My name is Linda. Today we are working on Rustic Gingerbread Man Christmas decor. So let's get started. What we're first going to do is rest this muffin tin I picked up at Dollar Tree. Now I've showed this process before, but I'm going to show it again. It's been a while. I'm going to use 120 grit sandpaper first to sand everything up because this had quite a bit of a sheen on it. And I had to make my own little pan here. Make sure you put some gloves on. And we're going to use hydrogen peroxide for this technique. And the recipe is 2 cups of hydrogen peroxide to 4 tablespoons of vinegar to 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Now what I do first, and you can half this recipe, double it, triple it, however you need. What I like to do first is do the peroxide and the vinegar first, and then put in whatever I'm going to put in there and let it just kind of soak for a little while and let that oxidation process kind of start going before I add the salt, because the salt speeds up that process. So I put this in, kind of flip it over, rub it around in there, and I let it sit for, a good half hour or so. Decided there's just not enough in there, so I'm doubling the recipe. I'm doing the same thing again, 2 more cups of peroxide, 4 tablespoons of vinegar, and I'm just kind of, eyeballing the tablespoons for the vinegar here. Again, letting it soak. Now, normally I wouldn't let it soak so long, but I know that this has quite a coating on it. And I wasn't sure if it was even going to work, but it does. And I show putting in here, 1.5 supposedly teaspoons of salt, but I just add a lot. But as you can see here in kind of the inner parts of the muffin tin on the back, after it's been soaking an hour or so, that oxidation process is going, and I will tend to add a lot more salt than what it says. I bet I add a good half of a cup of salt when I do this process. I go in, shake some more salt on it, let it sit a while, shake some more salt, let it sit a while, and here's what it looks like, actually like muffins were starting to bake. That salt just really foams up. It's all soft, as you can see, and you can see how the rest is going here. Just kind of taking stuff out, and then once it's where I like it, I usually dump the stuff outside, rinse it off, and this is kind of the process we got, which I think is good enough for the type of tin that it was. And what I'm going to do is just kind of add a little bit more. So I have this brown ink you can pick up in scrapbooking sections, Hobby Lobby, Michael's, Joann's, kind of a dark brown ink, and I'm just going into the areas that didn't rest as well. We're just going to kind of finish that process. Now this is a chalk ink because it dries faster and stays faster versus a pigment ink, or stays better versus a pigment ink. So you want to kind of look for a chalk ink when you're looking in scrapbooking sections for this kind of stuff. You could do like a little bit of, you could dry brush like some paint on. That would work well too. Those of you that might have ink in your supply, or you don't want to go out and buy ink, a little bit of dry brushing of paint. Now I'm using kind of a more of a different shade of brown, going in with a makeup sponge and kind of adding that to it, and you can see the different shades of the brown with the natural rest of the red is giving us kind of that years this muffin pan has been in your cabinet not used look. Or maybe sat outside in the junk pile, I don't know, but it's giving us enough. And I'm not worried about the back so much, but I do kind of shade it up as much, well, because it's the back side. I want it to look nice, don't want it to not have anything to it, but I focus more on the front, as you can see here. So let's now start to decorate. This is the fun part. I've got 2 pieces of dark brown felt here, and this is just a gingerbread man that I just kind of free-handed myself, no particular pattern. I wanted him kind of pudgy. I'm pinning him to the 2 pieces of felt here, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. I will show you here a process, because I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, what you kind of need to do, obviously, if you're not a sewer. Just going to show cutting it out a little bit. Here it is all ready to go, removing the pins and the pattern. 2 pieces here. If you are a hot gluer, you're going to want to go and glue about 1/2 to 3/4 of a gingerbread man, then stuff it and then finish gluing it. Now you can use Fabri-Tac if you don't want to use a hot glue gun. I'm taking mine to the sewing machine, of course. I'm going to sew part way around, and then I decided, I want to add some eyes to him, because I was kind of going back and forth whether I wanted to add eyes. So I only sewed to the top of the head, about 1/2 of him. I made some marks for some eyes. Going to use some beads here. I'm going to go to the inside. This is a little difficult, but I do have enough room here, and I'm going to put my needle with thread already ready to go through the little dot where I marked my first eye. I'm going to thread my bead onto the needle. and I'm going to go in really close to that bead, and I'm going to bring my needle from the front to the back side and then pull it all the way through. And then I'm going to do that twice. I'm going to come from the back side to the front to where that bead is. Trying to get it right close in here. And then I'm going to run that needle through the center of the bead again, and then right back close to the side of the bead. Pull the needle from the front to the back, and that eye is on. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go from the back to the front, add my bead, and then I'm going to go from the front to the back, right close to that bead, pull it through, and then I'm going to repeat the process. Back to the front, thread my bead through again, front to the back, and then finish it off. And I know I showed this in my last video, but in case someone, hasn't seen it. Kind of go through the felt here a little bit, and then bring my needle through, create a little loop, and then pull my needle through that loop and tie a knot, and it's done. And now I'm taking it back to the sewing machine to finish sewing a little bit more. I don't want this large of an opening. And then once I get that process, I'm going to start stuffing this little guy, and you can stuff him as stuffed as you want to. You can make him a skinny little gingerbread man or a little plump little gingerbread man. I'm going for a little bit of plumpness here. Kind of showing you this process of getting everything stuffed. And then once I get him stuffed, I'm going to kind of pin it a little bit because he's pretty well stuffed, and finish and go back through my sewing machine and sew that opening closed. Now I'm going to just trim my gingerbread man up a little bit, just kind of trimming where I have a little excess fabric there where I've sewn. And now I'm going to kind of distress him up a little bit. I've got a couple colors inks here, one that's a little bit reddish and one that's brown. I'm going to create some little red cheeks here, although we will tone those down with the brown a little bit since we went ahead and gave him some eyeballs. Give him some little cheeks as well. And then I'm going to take the brown. It's going to be kind of hard to see the brown, but you can see it. It does just add that little bit, so you can see here a little bit, that little bit of definition on the fabric, kind of making it a little bit more two-toned. And I kind of do the front and the back, although you really don't need to do the back because that part gets glued down to our muffin tin later on. So, but it was just kind of habit to flip it over and finish the back side. So that's what I'm doing, just kind of working with my little dauber here and rubbing the ink on. You can use a makeup sponge, of course. And I'm going to come in with a little bit of black ink as well, just to give a little color definition. Again, still working on the back, want to make it nice. But you can see that little bit of definition there. Maybe it looks like he burnt a little bit too much in the oven. I don't know, but he's such a dark brown fabric on this one. I just wanted to give it some color. And now I've got some red and white stripe fabric here. I just kind of made a slit in it, and I'm ripping the fabric here because we're going to make our little gingerbread man a scarf. And of course, you can use any kind of fabric design that you want. And I think I rip it to about maybe a little over 1 inch wide. And then I'm crinkling it all up because I want them all rustic and wrinkly and crinkly. And then I'm going to come in with some of that brown that I used on the gingerbread man, and going to just ink the front and the back of our fabric here because I want it a little bit dirty, don't want it too clean. That way it'll go in with our little gingerbread man. Wrinkling it up again. All nice and rustic looking. Going to go ahead and kind of tie it around his neck area, of course. Going to give him a nice little side bow. Now when I tie this, if you've got fabric that's kind of one-sided, I make the first loop, and as I go around, let me go in for you, make the first loop, go around, and go ahead and kind of twist your fabric forward, that back piece, so that way when you pull it through the other side, you'll get the right side coming out, just like that, easy, and then tie it into a bow. And I'm going to add a little bit of water here. It'll help kind of crinkle the fabric even more, wrinkle, crinkle, just like this, all the spots I want. And then I'm going to cut it to length, distress it a little bit more, and then I'm going to come in with the heat tool, and that will set all that wet wrinkle crinkle ribbon. And now we're going to make this tie and gingerbread man look a little even more rustic. Yes, I'm using instant coffee here. Now you can use Fabri-Tac glue. I would go with a clear glue, but I'm using my 3D matte gel, and I'm just painting it on with the paintbrush and then just pouring on that instant coffee. And some of it I'll leave it all nice and thick looking, and some of it I'll kind of rub off a little bit more, because sometimes in certain areas I just want the look of the crystal of that coffee, and then sometimes I just want just kind of the color a little bit and not so thick and bulky looking. Decide to kind of glue down the scarf a little bit more here. But this, I think, really adds to just that rustic, primitive look of our gingerbread man. You can put it anywhere you want, and of course if you don't want this, you can skip this step. But I just think that gives even more texture to our little guy here. And I don't worry about doing the back, because that, like I said earlier, that's going to get glued down. So just kind of pick your places that you want their little coffee to go on. Adding a little bit more here and there, just so it's, you know, looking good. This is what it looks like. And then I decide I'm going to go in and just rub some coffee in too, so I get that reddish look of that coffee you see here, but without all that texture, but it just adds even more. And I just kind of am liking how this is turning out, and I just add more, you know, of course on the scarf. I take it, rub it in, just really dirtying this little guy up. But he's lovable. Even though he's a little bit dirty, he is still lovable. We'll like him any way we can get him to be made, right? This way he kind of is all that rustic look and goes in with the muffin tin as well. And now I've got a twine bow here, and I decide I'm going to add a little more texture with it, and I'm going to go ahead and ink it up as well with that same brown ink, so it's nice and dirty looking. And then I've got a rusty star here and a rusty safety pin and a little rusty wire. And the rusty safety pin and wire I did myself using the process we did at the front. And the rusty star, I don't remember who I got it from. I just know I had searched at one time rusty 1-inch stars on eBay and, you know, found a decent price for them, and that's where I ordered the rusty stars. So just kind of inking this up, like I said, adding a little bit more ink. I'm going to go ahead and take this twine bow and glue it right up under our main bow there. And I'm going to safety pin the rusty star to the front of our main bow. And I'm going to take this rusty wire that I curled up, and I'm going to just glue that right at the top underneath that bow, so just peeking out a little bit. Now this recipe, I'm holding it here so you can pause if you want. This is the shortest recipe I found online, and then I just printed it off at my computer using old typewriter font from dafont.com. So if you wanted to copy that down and do the same recipe is fine. And I'm going to go ahead, I printed onto cardstock. I'm going to sew around the edges of it with my sewing machine, and I'm taking the open end of my scissor blades, and I'm kind of just scraping it along here to rustic everything up on this little recipe card. We're going to make this look just as dirty and grungy as we can, like the gingerbread man. I'm curling it up, I'm folding it up, pleating it back and forth, crinkling up the edges, rolling them up. I'm going to bring in some of that same ink, that light brown. I'm going to ink around all the edges and in between. Really kind of making sure I get on those fold lines and stuff. On the back, at least on the corners a little bit, because you might see those from the front because they fold up. So anything, you know, that I think might kind of get seen a little bit. And then I'm taking some of the coffee again, and I'm kind of rubbing it on there to get that little bit of color. And then I wasn't providing as much color as I want, so I'm coming out with a spray bottle of water here, just spritzing here and there, and then rubbing the coffee in just to kind of really grungy it right up for us. I think this just kind of, besides rustic, gives us a little bit of that primitive look. And then I'm leaving some of those coffee grounds and stuff on there, of course, not rubbing them off as much, so that it gives us that little bit of texture and matches our gingerbread man. And then I'm going to come in with the heat tool and get that all dried, and I'm going to set this aside. We're going to go to our muffin tin now. This is some of the greenery I picked out. Not too much, because we just want a little bit poking out. We're going to glue that kind of in the upper left corner here. And yes, this project is inspired by something I saw on Pinterest a couple of years ago, or Pinterest on a couple of years ago, and I decided to kind of put my spin on it and recreate it. Been wanting to do that forever, been in my little idea bin, so this is what we're doing. So I've got some pit berries here with some rusty bells on it, just kind of gluing that in a little bit. And then I've got another set of rusty bells, we're going to glue that in a little bit, and then we're going to set this one aside and go back to our gingerbread man. So now what we want to do, I've got a rusty safety pin here. We're going to pin our recipe to our little gingerbread man here, and I want to add just, yes, a little bit even more texture. So I'm crinkling it up even more, folding it even more, and those little folds I just did, I'm rubbing my ink pad along those folds so it'll just give me some nice lines through the recipe here. As if we couldn't add any more, but you know, I'm going to find some more rustic and primitiveness that we could add to this. And then we're going to glue our gingerbread man to the top of our muffin tin, and when he's all glued, this project is complete. So I really hope you enjoyed this project today. Leave me a comment down below and let me know if you're going to try this Christmas decor piece for yourself, and whether or not you really liked how rustic and kind of primitive it came out. I think this is the most kind of primitive project I've done, but I really kind of like it. I think it turned out really neat, really cool, and I think it would just look really fun in farmhouse rustic decor. Please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. Go ahead and hit that red subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss out on a single video from me. Come join my Facebook group. I have a link down in the description box below. I'd love to see you there. We all come together and share ideas, and from time to time, at least I just did my first Facebook Live class, so you don't want to miss that. And then come follow me on Instagram. I thank you for sharing your time with me, and I'll talk with you again soon. Bye.